What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. And today I wanted to do something a little bit different, and that is a channel Q&A. And so you might be wondering, where did I get these questions? And I got them from my members on my email list. And so I sent out a survey privately and I asked them for their specific questions and mentioned that I would be doing a video answering your questions. And so if you're on the email list and you're watching this video, here are your questions answered. Hopefully you enjoy it. And if you're not already on the email list, I want to do more things like this where I get more feedback from you on my list and new video ideas, and also send out exclusive content every now and then, just as a perk for being on the list. So if you want to join the list, it's down below in the description box. You can click the first link and that will take you to my workshop, which, speaking of which, if you want to check out my full composing and orchestration process from start to finish, it's all included inside of this workshop. So it goes step by step, showing you every single step along the way that I go to take my initial ideas all the way to the polished final master, everything completed. So if you want to check out my full process, you can use the first link down below. It's completely free. And as a result, you'll also be subscribed to my email list where I can send you regular updates about new content and of course, little goodies here and there as well. So with that being said, let's kind of jump on into these questions. I'm going to answer them in no particular order, but these are just the ones that came in as the responses came in. So the very first question here is Cinesamples Cinesymphony worth using in 2024? The sound is amazing, but it's very clunky at times. And to be completely honest, I think whatever series you're using, you should continue using if you are comfortable with that workflow and you like the results you're getting from it. So I completely agree that, there are some workflow elements that could be improved upon, but ultimately, what are we using these sample libraries for? It's to produce quality mockups, right? We're trying to create realistic sounding orchestrations using these tools. And so the workflow, while it is a component of our process, it's not the absolute most important thing we need to be focusing on. Ideally, yes, we have libraries that are super easy to work with. We pull them into our sessions, we just play, we get the result, boom, done, right? But if there are libraries that sound great but don't give you the best workflow, you can find workarounds for that and basically make the process easier for yourself. So personally, I would say absolutely, because I do use Cinesymphony, right? I do use Cinesamples libraries in my videos, which is quite fitting since I released my interview with Mike Patty from Cinesamples last week. So if you haven't watched that, check that out after this video. But yeah, I definitely like Cinesymphony, Cinebrass, Cineperk, Cinepiano, Cineharps. Those are staples for me, and I definitely use them all the time. All right, next question. When you are starting a composition from scratch, how do you know which chords will evoke the emotions you want them to? So this is a great question. This is more music theory based and talking more about the emotion behind music, which is ultimately what music is all about. And if I had to give like a general guideline, I would say start the basis of your composition with 80% diatonic chords. So keep things simple and outline a sketch for yourself where you maybe have your main theme and then you underline that with your chords, and keep it relatively simple. So choose like a major or a minor key and use chords within those keys to establish your harmonic skeleton. Then after this is where I really like to use the 80-20 rule, which applies to many, many things, not just music. But once you have your foundation, your 80% set with those diatonic chords, then you can move on to spicing it up with the remaining 20%. And this is something I do pretty unconsciously. Like I base my compositions pretty foundationally in diatonic harmony, but then I'll also spice them up with modal mixture using secondary dominants, chromatic chords, things to just give it extra juices of emotion and a little bit of extra punch. So I think it's those moments where you get that bit of emotion because the listener is expecting one thing, but they hear something else. And that's where you start to go like, oh, wow, I heard that something different. And maybe that made me feel a little excited, or maybe it gave me a moment of pause, like, wow, that was pretty cool, But then again, composition is one thing and orchestration is something else. And I think that those work hand in hand. So if you have a great composition but bad orchestration, your ideas may not be fully fulfilled, and vice versa as well. So if you orchestrate or arrange your piece in a really nice way that brings the musical ideas across however you want, that's also a great way that you can evoke certain emotions. So maybe for something more intimate, you use just piano, just like a solo string, something very, very sparse. And if you want that full ensemble sound, you want that tutti sound, it might make sense to bring in the full orchestra and contrast that with the intimate sound so you get that really bare sound, but then you also get that big bombastic moment, which can work really well and make the listener just feel like the energy is completely lifted and just alter their listening experience in a really nice way. And of course, there is no one size fits all way to create emotions, I think, in listeners, because everyone interprets music differently. But I think if you think about it from the perspective of setting the base using more predictable or more traditional elements first, and then using more spicy stuff to finish it off, to polish it, you can get some really good results there. And that's usually what I do. Okay, next question. I've been writing music for 3 years now. I'm 15 years old. That's super cool. Thank you so much for following the channel. And taking piano for 2 years. Amazing. I've noticed that I spend most of my time in the DAW writing and not having enough time to practice for my weekly meetup. And I'm wondering how to balance the two also with school. Thanks, from Luke. Okay, so let's see. You're writing music for a few years, taking piano for a few years as well, not having enough time to practice, and juggling with school. So basically, I think you're asking, how do you balance music and school, right? And to me, the best thing you can do, honestly, is to just schedule allotted times for practice. So if you've been writing music for a while, you probably know how to write already, which is great. But if you're just writing whenever you want to, then that's not really a recipe for consistent progress, obviously. So what I would do is dedicate a specific portion of your day, maybe that's just 30 minutes to an hour, dedicate that to writing or piano practice or whatever you want to do. And then of course, school is a natural obligation. So you're going to want to do school, make sure you get good grades, but also make time for your passions, okay? And that's a lot, something that a lot of people don't really do. They use an excuse of, oh, I just don't have the time to do what I want to do. But the thing is, you don't have time. You make time for the things you want to do. You have to prioritize in your life, obviously, right? So for me, I place a big priority on health and fitness, but I also prioritize work, right? Those two go pretty much hand in hand in my life. And then also I prioritize pleasure, like playing tennis, finding good food, playing Smash, like things like that. Those also make me happy. So it's all a balance, but I think to really see it concretely in front of you and balancing it with a schedule will make things a lot more visual for you, and you'll be able to follow it in a very consistent manner from that perspective. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, next question. Hey, what are some of your favorite extended chords and how do you like to voice them? So this is a great question. Going back to color chords, right, they can be really, really useful in a lot of contexts. But again, just making sure we follow the 80-20 rule. You don't want to use extended chords all the time, because the more information you share with the listener, the more easily fatigued their ear can get as well. So it's all a balance. Start with a diatonic bass and then add on top of that as necessary. That being said though, I think my favorite extensions are some of the simplest. The sixth is not really an extension, I guess, like using a C6 chord. But even just a regular major 7 is really, really beautiful, right? If you have the root and the seventh, a seventh apart and not right next to each other. Nines are great. I really like the major 7 sharp 11 kind of sound. Like the end of a lot of big band charts, they use that sound with that sort of triad at the very top that has a really beautiful sound. It's like a sharp 4 sort of sound to it, augmented 4. So it's really, really cool. But flat 9 is also another one of my favorites. If you watch a lot of my piano videos where I improvise, I use a lot of flat 9s in my dominant 7 chords, because that flat 9 really wants to resolve that semitone down to that 8th, which is the same as the tonic note of the scale. And for me, that's a really beautiful sound that just draws the listener in and pulls them back to home base. And so for me, that's probably my favorite extension of them all. All right, next. Any tips for dealing with copyright and dealing with arrangements? Both selling sheet music of arrangements and making videos of arrangements, or with using recordings under copyright in videos? Another great question. Unfortunately, I don't specialize in copyright, so this is not really my area of expertise, but I think if you're trying to create an arrangement of an existing piece of music and you want to sell it, you have to contact the original composer, arranger of that piece and get permission. And that might mean you have to pay a specific fee in order to have the rights to do that. But I think if you want to create an arrangement of a tune and just have it for personal pleasure, and you're not planning on selling it, maybe you just want to share it with a few friends for them to use it, I think that's totally fine. But as long as it turns into a monetization model where you want to make an income from that, that's where you have to get in touch with the lawyers or the company who owns that original score, or the rights to that original, because that's only fair, right? They're the original people who made that version of the piece, and so you should deserve the income from those sales as well. So yeah, if you're trying to make money from that, I think you have to get in contact with them and pay them either a fee, or like an upfront fee, or do some sort of commission, right? Or where when someone purchases your score, the original artists get a small percentage of that score as well. Okay, so just make sure you're doing your due diligence and checking all the rules there. Okay, next question. What is the best way to come up with a B section that is contrasting yet isn't completely different from the A section so that it flows well together? Another great question, a super common question as well, B sections. And my friend Ryan Leach has done quite a few videos on this. Very, very, practical methods as well. But I've also done a couple of videos on B sections. I think the best thing you can do is start from a similar place. So I would say keep the original key, for example. That's a great place to start. And also keep the same sort of thematic structure you might have from the A section too. So maybe your A section started with a sentence or a period form. Maybe the B section, you can keep that same form. So if you use a sentence in the A, you also use a sentence form in the B, but you change up that melody completely. You choose a completely different melody, following the same structure, but choosing different notes. Maybe you also change up the chord progression underneath too. Changing up the harmony is really important for sure. Like if you started your A section on the tonic chord, the 1 chord, maybe you start your B section with the 4 chord. That's very, very common, right? A lot of bridges do this in pop songs. They start on different chords that are not the 1 chord. So keeping the same key in the same form can work really well, and changing the melody and harmonic structure itself, that can do wonders for creating a contrasting B section. But it also could be just as easy to modulate. Like you change keys, but then you do very slight modifications to your to your main melody and to your chord progression as well. I mean, that could also constitute as a B section. But I think as long as people can recognize the original theme in your B section, then they're more likely to think of it as an A section. So for it to have its own identity, I would personally write in a different melody compared to the A, and also change up the chord progression that, to accompany it as well. So that would be my main suggestion. All right, next question. I'm looking for a relatively low to middle cost library that has some of the less common instruments, such as harmonica and accordion. What do you recommend? Good question. I don't think I have any harmonica and accordion libraries. They're probably included in some bigger packages. But one company that does niche stuff really well is Embertone. But it might be as easy as just searching up like VI Control and then, including those libraries in there, harmonica and accordion, and seeing what you find. Personally, just because I don't use them as much, I can't really give you a great answer. But check out Embertone, check out, I guess I don't really know too many other companies who really focus on niche instruments, but definitely give them a look. Next question. What is the better book on orchestration? Cecile Forsyth or Blatter? I'm probably saying those names wrong. I don't think I know either one of them actually. So I can't give you a good answer on that, but the way I learned orchestration the most and composition is simply by listening. And this is probably something I'll continue to stress throughout this video, but I really think that if you can use your ears to critically analyze what's happening in a piece of music, that is the best learning tool you can have at your disposal. Now, I would also supplement that though with educational videos. So there are a few playlists on YouTube where you can find these musicians from different orchestras doing a feature about their instruments. So they talk about it a little bit, they talk about the technical details, they actually play as well so you can hear the instrument. And that's really helpful because when you hear the whole orchestra in context, you can pick out like, oh, that sounds like the oboe I just learned about, or that violin section sounds amazing. And that's what they mean when they say, oh, legato really, connects lines together and makes it sound beautiful with the phrasing. So I would do a combination of listening to real music with live players, but also watch educational videos and really listen to the qualities of the instruments, because that will really just go hand in hand with each other, I think. And then of course you want to play around with your sample libraries. Good quality sample libraries will teach you a lot as well about the playable ranges, about where they personally like speak the best in their ranges, where they're strong, where they're weak, the different timbres, right? Like brass can get really raspy or really mellow and warm. You learn all those things by playing with your libraries as well, and you have complete freedom, obviously. So that is what I would personally recommend. All right. What is your advice for mixing double basses, especially pizzicatos? I find it very hard to maintain life and balance at the same time with the bass pizzicatos, as they're either really boomy or have no low-end energy. Thank you, by the way. I absolutely love your videos. Thank you so much. So mixing double basses and pizzicatos, I think it comes down to managing the low end for sure. I feel like the Berlin strings double basses pizzicato is pretty much perfect. Like I used to use that a lot. Nowadays, I just use the ones from CSS just because I use CSS pretty much every single day. But I do have to use some EQ to really cut out that low end rumble, and sort of how the frequencies swell in for some of the low end strings is not particularly pleasing to my ear. So I use the EQ to really cut out that low end as well, usually around 100 and below. And if you want more of the plucking sound, then you have to sweep and find that area where you're really hearing the pluck on the strings, where the fingers are really plucking the strings, and then notch that up a couple of dB as well. So you're taking away low end that's maybe excessive, or if you need more low end, then you just sweep around till you find the resonance that you really like and pull that up. And then if you want more of the pluck, you also pull up that register where you're hearing the pluck as well. So EQ, I guess, would be the main answer there. Okay. Next question. Hey Chris, I'm having to replace my Windows desktop. At present, I link up another Dell desktop in sync using SPDIF and two interfaces, and then I do a whole bunch of other stuff. I think now is a good time for me to take the plunge and update to avoid certain issues. I'm a Cubase 13 Pro user and want to write full orchestral compositions. Less hassle means more clarity with the job on hand. I would be grateful if you have any recommendations around the 2 or 2500 range. Yeah, so Tom, I don't use Windows, so I can't really speak into that, but I feel like a lot of people would have personal recommendations on, how to customize your PC so that you have a powerful enough system. But for the Mac Studio that I do have, it's really robust, I would say. I think I have 64 gigabytes of RAM at the moment, and I can handle most of my sessions just fine. And very, very rarely I will have the system overload message in Logic, but it's relatively rare. And that's usually when I'm running all my contact tracks without any bounces or any freezes. So I would, I would probably ask around, to some Windows friends and see what they would say. But I think if you have enough RAM and, you have nice external disks, SDDs, maybe HDDs, or SSDs, sorry, not SDDs, SSDs and HDDs that are fast at streaming samples to your main computer, that could really help you as well. Okay, next question. Who are some of your musical influences? Yeah, I love this question. I think for me, I grew up listening to a lot of classical music because I'm a classical pianist. That was like a lot of my main thing. But my favorite composer is probably Chopin from the classical romantic era. And I like Rachmaninoff, I like Liszt, all those guys. And then I guess more in modern times, I listened to a lot of Michael Bublé growing up. So that really developed my love for jazz standards and big bands. And I listen to a lot of pop music nowadays, as well as some easy listening stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of my influences came from, Bublé's arrangements and music, classical music, of course, pop music, a lot of Disney Broadway music as well, actually. I do a lot of accompanying work for a musical theater teacher, and her kids sing a lot of songs from, movies and films and stuff like that. And I usually accompany them on the piano, and I love a lot of those songs because they really strike a great balance between simplicity and complexity. So for me, that's a really fun thing as well. So a lot of Broadway, a lot of classic Disney stuff. Those would be my main influences. Plus the Super Mario Galaxy series and Odyssey series, really great music and full use of orchestras as well, which is really cool. Do you think it's important to learn music history? Why or why not? All right, so I'm probably a little bit biased, but I personally do not like music history myself. I just always found history boring. I don't really like museums or things like that. So I personally don't think it's that important to learn music history, but I think it is good to know where music came from. Like if there are certain styles that you want to write in or certain instruments you want to look more into, it would make sense to learn more about that instrument and learn about the history of those instruments and styles. So I think it's important to learn some history to the point where you know the foundations of that instrument or style. But I personally don't get caught up in, in 1966, this composer was born and they lived here and things like that. For me, that's just super boring. And yeah, I just kind of frustrate myself even just thinking about it. So I don't think it's that important, but I think you should learn at least the basics of whatever you're interested in. What are some of the hurdles you encounter in regards to your ego when composing music, i.e. feeling self-conscious or feeling not good enough? What impact does an overactive ego have on a composer, and how do you overcome those challenges? Wow, yeah, that's a good question as well. Imposter syndrome is definitely a real thing, right? Like, who am I to write music? My music sounds bad, no one's gonna like it. Yeah, that's something that's gonna come no matter what you're writing, for sure. Like, I still feel that a lot. Every time I'm writing a new track, there's a little voice in the back of my brain saying, but what if someone doesn't like this, right? But ultimately, who are we writing for? I think most artists get into creating art because they want to personally express themselves. It's not our job to please other people with our music, at least not the way I see it. I feel like art should be a form of self-expression, and if people around us enjoy it, I think that's a beautiful thing. Then that just means that you're writing something that has more appeal, which is great. But a lot of artists know that their work is polarizing, and in a way that's a great thing too, because that stirs up conversation and it builds camps of people who really like what they're doing and people who absolutely detest what they're doing, and that's totally fine. So that to sum it up, I would say it doesn't really matter. Don't worry about what other people think. Write what you want to write, and as you continue to release more, you're going to get better in every field that you're participating in, right? Mixing, composing, orchestrating, all of that stuff will naturally get better as you do it more and more. So yeah, you might look back at your work 10 years from now and think, oh, that was such a piece of poo. But that was part of the learning process. If you didn't put it out in the first place, then you wouldn't have something to compare it to and use as sort of a stepping stone for the next goal, for the next improvements. So yeah, definitely think of it as a self-expression form of art and not something to please other people with. Okay, that's how I would put it. Next question: when working on a project, do you register your music as the composer before delivering it, or do you deliver the composition without registering you as the composer, hoping the customer registers it? Do you register yourself as just the composer or register also the mastered track? Yeah, so this is a good question. The short answer is I don't really know what the proper way to do it is, because I usually don't really score for a living. Now, from the experience that I do have writing for a couple projects, once the tracks are all sent to the director and the managing hands, basically, they will take care of the credits. Of course, the head composer, like if there are multiple composers working on a project, the head composer will take that into account and try to push for that credit on the film or whatever it might be, the game, right? But I guess ultimately it's in the hands of the actual director or developer to actually make sure that comes across. So I got my IMDb credit after the film was actually released, and I think that was due to the head composer and Catherine Dern actually registering me as an additional composer for that film. So I didn't do it myself, but if there is a way for you to do it yourself, then maybe you negotiate that with the director and talk about that. What is the main difference in the workflow when writing modern cinematic music versus more classic traditional type of orchestral music? Okay, yeah, great question here. So modern cinematic music may be more like trailer stuff versus more traditional stuff. The biggest difference, I would say, is dynamics. More modern music tends to be more upfront and sort of in your face. And so what you're going to hear is a lot less dynamic variance across the board. So if you have a piece of music for a trailer, let's say, very likely you're not going to have to turn up and down the volumes because everything has been very carefully crafted so that you can watch the film and not think, oh, that's way too loud, or oh, that's way too quiet. And so that comes down to a lot of compression and making sure the soft parts of your track pretty much match the absolute volume of the loudest peaks of your track. And That's more of what I personally aim for. Like, I don't want to write music where people have to turn up and down their volume controls while listening. Now, in more traditional orchestral music, you do have dynamic variants, right? Sometimes you do have to turn up and down the volume, and that's totally fine. But that's also baked into the performance. And if the sound engineer thinks it's better to maintain the natural dynamics and, leave it to the listener to adjust the volume to their own liking, then I think that's fine as well. So it just comes down to what you really want to do. But if you want that more modern sound, then I think compression is really important, and automation, right? So after you've applied the compression, maybe there are still some moments that are too quiet and some that are too loud. So you use volume automation to make sure those parts do not either peak up too much or duck down too low, and make sure those levels are consistent. That's what I would say. All right, we're almost there. Next question. Let's see. What's the best way to make money licensing orchestral covers of classical public domain based works? Interesting question. I don't really know, because I don't do this. I don't license orchestral covers of really anything, because I don't really do orchestral covers, I guess. The only covers I've really done are maybe for John Williams' E.T. Flying theme, and I also did a Disney orchestral medley, but I don't really sell those at all, right? Those are just covers. Those are passion projects that I put up on my channel. So unfortunately, I can't give you a good answer here. What is the main difference? I'm interested in composing music in the late Romantic style following such composers as Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff. So how do I compose such as harmony and orchestration? Right, so my simple answer comes back down to listening. And even better, if you have an orchestral score, you can study what the music is actually doing at a theoretical level, and then also look at it from an arrangement and orchestration level as well. Ideally, you do have some music theory background, because then you can understand basics of scales and chords and intervals and stuff, so then the music will make a lot more sense on the page. But then you also want a little bit of proficiency in your instrument as well. And I always recommend piano, because that will allow you to basically play out certain ideas. Maybe you're hearing certain voicings, but you don't really know how they're translating to the actual orchestra. You can play them out on the piano and see how they sound to your ears. And then you sort of associate that with the score at hand. So listen to lots of music in that style, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, and then if you have the score on hand, definitely look at the score as well and pick out certain sections to study as well. I would also recommend maybe joining some groups, Discord servers or Facebook groups that do score study. This could be really, really useful, and it also keeps you accountable too, because I know a lot of these groups do weekly or monthly sort of meetups, and they actually look at different scores and study the theory. So it's all really, really cool. And that's probably also the best way to learn too, not just in isolation, but with other people with you as well on the journey. All right, next question. Dear Christopher, I love writing new age music, but I suck at programming VSTs. Others get great sounds, I get seal snorts. Anyway, if you weren't a millionaire, where would you get a nice fat collection of new age pad sounds? Okay, so yeah, this is another sort of question where I'm probably not the best person to ask, because I just don't use pads and sound design all that much. However, I feel like using pre-built sounds is probably one of the best things you can do as a composer, just because the polished product is already there at your disposal. You just have to choose what note to play using that sound. If you know how to program a synth though and create a pad from scratch, that's amazing. But for pads, I usually use something like Elysian from SonuScore and Best Service. That would be my go-to for those sorts of things. Elysian is really known for its sort of rhythmic pads and stuff, but they also have things called spheres, where it's just that pad that basically has and creates that soundscape, really fills out the frequency spectrum. So Elysian would be the one I would typically go to, and I just love the out-of-the-box sounds in general. So sound design is not my forte, so I use tools where the work has pretty much already been done, and I just have to focus on making the actual music. So hope that kind of makes sense. All right, last two questions here. So I would love to know how to write and compose soaring strings, sort of in the fashion of Alan Menken and John Williams. I know, an odd combination. Strings that are full, lush, and rich. Okay, so this is a great question. I actually created a full course on this called Expressive String Arranging, where I actually literally talk about how to write four strings in a lush, more emotive sort of way with singing harmonic, melodic lines and full passages with your libraries and all that stuff. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out on my website, christophersu.com. But I guess for a quick answer, the voicing is really, really important. Of course, you want to make sure you're using libraries that give you that sort of performance in the samples themselves. So CSS, Vista, those are more over the top sort of vibrato examples, but even just regular vibrato sustains that can give you a really beautiful, warm sound can get the job done well too. But that being said, yeah, the voicings are really important. So thinking about the harmonic series, making sure you have wide intervals at the bottom, preferably octaves. Then you use smaller intervals as you build up. So maybe that those are sixths or fifths, thirds, whatever it is to fill up all those chord tones in your voicings. The other thing that will really work is using good voice leading. So transitioning from one chord to another, usually you want the inner voices to move as little as possible because you want that transition from chord to chord to be really, really smooth, right? So if you have voices bouncing all over the place, like the violins are jumping octaves, the violas are jumping fourths and fifths, and the basses are going all over the place, it's going to create a sort of messy, chaotic sound, and that's usually not what we want when we're writing for smooth soaring strings. So yeah, good voice leadings, and that will give you a good bass. And then if you want those soaring lines on top, then you can let the violins do all that stuff. But at least they have that bass to settle on in the bottom using the violins, cellos, and basses. Okay, there we go. And final question, Christopher, how are you doing? Good, good, thank you. I'm Noah. My question is, how do we as creators avoid hating our creations or judging them? I find that the hardest part about making music is knowing if it's good or bad, and I know it's hard to define that anyway, as everybody has a different taste. The most efficient way I found to get out of this hole is to make music for me, make stuff that I like and find interesting, and also separating writing and composing from editing. Yet self-criticism and anxiety creeps in from time to time, never enough to make me quit, but enough to make me miserable, Even though I get positive feedback from both producers and casual listeners about my stuff, I can't stop cringing at some stuff. Okay, so Noah, great question, and thank you so much for being vulnerable. I have to say that I also cringe at some of my stuff, especially my old stuff. A lot of it I can't stand. And at the time I thought it was amazing. Like I love those ideas, but nowadays I've learned from my experience, obviously, what I've done in the past, and I would do things differently now, obviously, when writing music or orchestrating. So there is always going to be a level of self-criticism, I think. Of course, there will be people who think everything they do is perfect, and those people are not correct. But yeah, we can always learn from anything we're doing. And I guess I just personally never really struggled with this problem. Like I think if I write something that I enjoy, then it's hard for me to hate it, and there's almost no point of me in hating it because then I'm just second guessing myself at every single turn, and I know that sort of negative feedback loop will just make me feel worse. So I usually try not to overthink about my ideas. If I hear something in my head, if something really inspiring pops up, I'm going to be sure to put that down in Logic as quickly as possible because I'm going to associate that inspirational moment with a good idea. And again, I'm thinking like, okay, if it's something I want to write, then I'm sure there will be someone else out there who will enjoy it as well. That might not be true, but I think it is true, right? Because the sort of music you write, as you sort of build an audience, those sort of people will become more loyal and get to know your work better from the style that you're actually making. They'll like the people who don't like your stuff will naturally weed themselves out. They won't follow you, but the people who do will naturally come. So I would say ignore that nagging voice that's there all the time and focus on the positive of, wow, like I actually came up with something that I like. This actually sounds good to me, and I want to commit to this, and I want to move on to the next step, whether that's editing or orchestrating. So don't overthink it. You still want to consider that critical voice now and then, but don't let it stop you from releasing music and just creating stuff that you actually enjoy. And again, I haven't really suffered from this problem myself, but I can definitely see why someone would. And yeah, again, I thank you for being vulnerable about it. But the best thing I can say is just to carry through it, power through, and really make something that you enjoy, and then make sure to release it as well. Because if you don't commit to releasing it, it's just going to stay on your drive, and you always have the chance to go through and nitpick it and, you know, edit it over and over again. It's just not going to be a good thing. So always release when you're at least 80%, even 90% happy with it. It's never going to be perfect, but just put it out there. Okay? So those are all the questions. And yeah, I know it's a longer video, but I want to thank you so much for watching. I did a lot of talking today in this video, and my voice is kind of tired, but I wanted to get through all these questions and share some practical advice. I hope it was helpful. And again, if you want to join my email list and get updates on new videos, maybe you can feature in them as well, and just get, you know, exclusive goodies from time to time. You can check out my full workshop down below in the description box, and it goes through my entire composing orchestration process. And in the process, you'll be joining my list as well, where you can get all those updates. But that being said, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.